John Anderson wiped away the blood from his knuckles with a dirty napkin he had stuffed into his pocket. He was beaten, bruised, and alone with a lit cigarette in his mouth being the only thing that gave him some form of comfort as he walked towards the bridge ahead. He was lucky enough to get away this time. The authorities hadn't caught up to him yet, and he planned to keep it that way. This wasn't the first time he'd gotten into a bar fight. This was nothing compared to the other crimes he committed, ranging from a couple of stabbings to a number of rapes. Anderson was wanted by many different parishes in the state of Louisiana. He didn't care anyway. His attitude towards authority was always negative. Even when he was young, he would spit on the sheriff's lawn every time he would pass his house while riding his bike around the block. Like most criminals, Anderson felt he was untouchable, that he could get away with anything. He looked ahead to the bridge that was almost shrouded in darkness, if not for the light on the other side. He realized his cigarette was going out, but before he could light another one, an idea popped into his head. He lit up his lighter and took out his bottle of cologne from his back pocket. His sister had taught him this trick a long time ago, and this seemed like the time to use it. One spray and a gush of flame burst out into the night sky. It was the perfect way to navigate through this dark path. John knew about the local legend attached to the bridge. The story of Shelly Thomason is a tragic, gruesome tale, not for the faint of heart. Shelly was considered an outsider by most of the townsfolk. Bullied by her peers and shunned by her parents, she was the kind of person you always felt bad for. One night she decided to walk on this bridge alone and was cornered by a group of thugs armed with knives. They tore up her dress and brutally raped her over and over again. The suffering ended when they carved her eyes out and threw her body into the waters below. Locals still say that the spirit of eyeless Shelly wanders around the bridge at night, looking for whoever is guilty of committing an atrocity, and when she finds them, she'll tear their eyes from their sockets. They say the spirit punishes the guilty and leaves the innocent to live another day. John thought the tale was a bunch of superstitious ghost story bullshit, but he would be lying if he didn't say he was somewhat intrigued by the legend, even fascinated by it. He believed that a girl named Shelly Thomason was raped and murdered on that bridge, but he could never believe that her specter returned from beyond the grave for vengeance. To him, Shelly Thompson was dead, buried deep in the ground, and all of the supernatural jargon was made up just to scare away dumb teenagers from sneaking out at night and smoking weed at the bridge. There were sightings of Shelly walking around the bridge, but John wrote this off as people getting high off their own supply. After all, this place was a hotspot for crackheads and druggies. The bridge looked and felt abandoned. The thing was old and its wood was rotting away. It would only be a matter of time before someone decides to take the bridge down. John saw this thing as a rundown piece of shit. But to the locals, this bridge was a relic of a bygone era. History to be preserved, and as long as the legend lived, so did the bridge. To the locals, getting rid of the bridge was as blasphemous as getting rid of the French Quarter in New Orleans. To them, the specter was real, and only outsiders would doubt it. Only the innocent could walk freely on that bridge, while the rest would be thrown into the cold waters below. John produced another gush of flame from his makeshift flamethrower as he felt the blood run down his nose to his lips. His injuries were hurting like hell, and his eyelids were only getting heavier. Mosquitoes were swarming around him, buzzing in his ears. He couldn't stand it anymore. All he wanted was to get to his sister's place, get patched up, and go to bed. He was halfway across the bridge when he heard someone call his name. Johnny. He halted to a stop and nearly dropped his bottle of cologne. Who's there? Look into the river. John glanced into the river below. His mouth hung open and eyes went wide. Bodies were floating in the waters below, all of them pale and eyeless. "Join us, John." He dropped both the lighter and cologne. He ran as fast as he could to the light to the other side of the bridge. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. "Fuck!" he blurted out. His curly black hair was soaked in sweat. As he got up to look back at the bridge, he saw a figure emerge from the darkness. Her white dress was tattered and torn, her black hair long and messy. Her skin is pale. Blood poured from her empty eye sockets, almost as if she was crying. Oh shit. John was paralyzed with fear. "You doubted me, Johnny." His body was now trembling. "It's time to pay for what you've done." Shelly was getting closer. "Your violent delights are now going to have violent ends." She was now right in front of him, her hands at his throat. "Don't kill me. Please, I beg of you. Please." Before he could plead anymore, she placed her thumbs into his eye sockets and pushed down hard. His screams echoed throughout the night sky. Search parties were sent after him, but none of them could turn up with his body. The search for John Anderson went on for 3 months, and the only evidence that was found was a bottle of cologne and his lighter. Some locals still say, when they walk past the bridge at night, they can see the pale victims of Shelly's vengeful wrath, and among those bodies is the eyeless face of John Anderson.
Don't look behind you. You now want to look behind you. I know it. It's intellectual. Like thinking about pink elephants when you're told not to. Maybe you already did it. Maybe you chuckled at being so silly and turning around. That will only make what's about to happen even worse for you. I'm sorry about doing this, but I just want to survive. I have a kid, a husband. I love my life. I bet you have people who love you too. And I'm very sorry about doing this. Listen to me, please. Don't look back. It's lurking close to you, you know? So close. Can you hear that? It's almost imperceptible now. But it won't be for long. I bet you can notice something moving closer. I sent it to you, offered it a new victim. His story is a trap, and you've fallen for it. Now, it knows you're out there. Running won't help. I've tried it before. I barely survived that experience. Let me give you a piece of advice. It's the least I can do. Now that I've doomed you to this hellish experience, for no reason in the world, allow the lights to go off. Keep them on. At all times, during the night, during the day, it doesn't matter. Keep your cell phone handy, in case. And make sure the alarms in your apartment at home stop working. It's clever that way. Devious that way. Don't scream. Screaming makes it hurt you all the worse. But more importantly, don't look directly at it. So, for crying out loud, don't look behind you now.
The nights were long and the work was stressful. The wind grew wilder by the moment. One day or the other, he would have to quit this job. And when that day came, the truth would be set free. The awful food, his incompetent coworkers, the filthy restrooms, never minding the fact that the place was infested with rats and roaches. Every crack and crevice was lurking with them. All of this was buzzing through his head until he saw her. She was the woman every man wanted to lay eyes on. Cherry red lips, long dark hair. Her figure was practically perfect. When he saw her, he saw a beautiful red rose. He would soon learn that the rose had many thorns. He began to stutter when she asked for her order. She just said she'd like a BLT sandwich with a side of fries. When he got back to the counter, he realized he was sweating and blushing. He also realized he had a massive erection bulging from his pants. He quickly ran behind the counter to prevent anyone else from seeing it. He ran to the employee's restroom as fast as he could. He got in and locked the door shut. The shift was almost over. One more hour and he'll be out of this repulsive shit show. He looked up at the mirror and said to himself, "You can get through this. You got through this every other fucking night." After this pep talk, he got out of the restroom. For the next hour, he continued his work with the thought of the woman lingering in the back of his mind. Soon they were closing up shop. The man walked down his cold street to his bus stop. Even in his coat, he was still freezing. The wind was just too breezy. Shaking and shivering in his boots, he saw his bus stop in the distance. When he got closer, he saw her. It was the woman. Now she was wearing a bright red dress and her amazing hair blowing in the wind. She motioned a gesture for him to follow her. From that point, his mind was hers to do what she pleases. He felt like his mind belonged to a witch. The thing was, a witch was old, green, and mean. She was young and sweet. She was an angel, a saint. Wherever she went, he followed, corner to corner, street to street. They eventually came upon an old trail. "Follow me here, darling," she said in a seductive tone. When they got to the spot, she undressed right in front of him. She got on top of him and viciously made out with him. One of his hands cupped her breast. The other was pressed against her ass. She took him by the hand. "Make love to me," she requested. Something was off. The place where her eyes were supposed to be were now two black voids. Her mouth began to extend. Rows of razor-sharp fangs were exposed. Once he felt the teeth bite into his flesh, he snapped out of his trance. She let go of his arm and he ran as fast as he could to the nearest street. Blood was dripping from his wound. He tripped, landing face first on the pavement. Blood ran down his nose. Crawling, he was trying to hold back tears. Then he felt something grab his leg. He looked back to see a hideous creature holding his leg. Hot urine poured down his pants. Tears ran down his face. Snot bubbles from his nose. The thing dragged him into the abyss. His screams echoed throughout the woods.